I'm Leon Todd for G66. Welcome to another Tuesday Tone Tip. On today's video, I want to take a look at some of the advanced features of the drive block and how you can use them to further customize your favorite guitar sounds. We're going to be looking at the EQ sections and diode swapping options. But before we do that, let's have a listen to the starting point. I've got a Fender Player 2 Strat on the neck pickup into the Axe FX3. I'm using the ODS 100 clean amp model, this EV12 Dynacab in here. I've got a ribbon and a dynamic mic blended together, and then a little bit of the medium hall reverb on there. Let's have a listen to it as a starting point. I don't mind that at all. Let's start out with the Super OD drive type. I'm going to be using this one for a lot of the examples to start out with. Let's just kick it in at the stock settings and have a listen to what it does to this clean tone. Now, like a lot of drives based on real-world pedals, the control set is fairly straightforward, and this can be a great thing. Fewer options means there's fewer things to get lost in the sauce with. However, sometimes having a single tone control can be a little bit limiting on there. So what I'm going to do is just set this back to 5. What the Axe FX and the other Fractal products give us is the ability to go way beyond what a simple little pedal can do. For example, if we go to the tone section in here, you can have a full EQ section in here. There's bass, mid with a selectable mid frequency, a high mid, and a treble control in here. So for example, if I kind of liked that stock setting Super OD where it was, but I wanted slightly more mid-range, I actually got a couple of different ways to do that. I could even roll off a little bit more bass and treble and really focus everything on the mids, which is going to be great for making the guitar poke out in a mix, especially if it's like a Strat single coil. Let's have a play around with those settings. Now, the tone control gave me very drastic changes in the overall EQ, but this tone section really lets me fine tune it. Like when I'm close to what I want, and then again, say I wanted to just change the mid-range or the low end ever so subtly, I would do it with the tone settings in here. There's also a graphic EQ in here with the ability to place it post-drive or pre-drive in there. So again, if we just take these stock settings on the SD1, I'm actually just going to do this. I'll hit Edit, reset current channel. This will undo all of the EQ in here. So we've got our stock settings. I could come in here and really sculpt the tone with the graphic EQ. Again, say I wanted to like boost some mid-range frequencies, say 1000 and 1600, but I wanted to pull out some low mids and some high end along with some low end. I could do that really easily. This is like having an EQ pedal built into the drive block with the ability to place it after the drive, so to kind of sculpt the distorted tone that you create with the drive block, or hit the front of the amp a little bit harder, again, in conjunction with the drive, or as I've got it here with the graphic EQ set pre. So in this case, I'm sculpting what's going into the overdrive in there. So I can use it, in this case, like a mid boost into the drive. A really great example of this would be something like this. I'll go over to channel D and I'll bring up this octasynth setting, not the OD808, but the octasynth from my blocks library. So this is using the octave distortion. Now, the trick with this type is that if you play, say, on the neck pickup and you roll your tone control all the way down, I'm just going to disable the graphic EQ while I do this so it's not in there. This is basically the classic Hendrix trick. You play on the neck pickup with the Octavia emulation on there and you get this kind of synth sound. Now, let's say you don't have a tone control on your guitar or you don't have a neck pickup. What you could do would be to go to the graphic EQ section, set the graphic EQ to pre, and then just roll out all the high end, say from above 1000 Hertz on there. And this will give us a very similar effect. We'll hear it without it and then with it. I'm still on the neck pickup, but I have my tone control all the way up. So have a listen to the effect the graphic EQ has here. Pretty awesome, right? I was still getting that synthy overtone by using the bridge pickup on my guitar there. Great use of the graphic EQ, and I'm sure you could all come up with a bunch of different ways to use the graphic EQ pre or post in the drive setup along with the EQ on the tone page. But I think the thing that is probably the coolest and most advanced function you can do in the drive block on here is going to the advanced section and playing around with the different diode types and the different diode configuration in here. This would be like having the ability to just open up your pedal at any time and do virtual mods to it. So you can see at the moment, let's take a look at this super overdrive. I've reset this block in here. So this is going to be the stock setup. There's these diodes in here, and you're probably looking at it going, I don't know what these numbers and names mean. They're just going to be a part specification for different diodes or transistors. In this case, I'm just staring at that going, cool. That's the one the Super OD uses. But the more interesting thing is you can see it's using 2 diodes for the positive side and 1 diode for the negative side. So it's got an asymmetric diode setup in here. And this is one classic thing about the Super Overdrive. This is basically a tube screamer. And again, different diode type in here, but you can see that it's got a symmetric diode setup in there. And these actually, they sound different, but they're not that far removed in terms of their main function. I just had to turn the gain up or the drive up on the max off and back the tone off on the Super OD, and they sounded pretty similar in there. But one thing that can be super cool to get the behavior closer or to take your favorite overdrive and just tweak it out a little bit, let's take this diode setup and the asymmetrical nature of it from the Super OD and we'll use it in this max off. In fact, I'm not going to change the diodes just yet. What I'm going to do is just go from this symmetric setup to an asymmetric setup. kind of beefing up the sound, isn't it? Let's now swap the diodes. So we've got these 1N916s. Don't worry, I had to write this down and try to memorize it from the Super OD over here. We can see we've now got the same diode types and the same diode setting in the Maxoff 808 now. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to copy over these settings to channel C over here. And in channel C, I'm going to leave them on those stock settings. So we'll have the same, let's say, authentic settings for the Maxoff over here. I've got the original diode types and the original diode setup. What do I have? The gain cranked up on there. Same authentic settings over here, but the different diode setup under the advanced tab. Let's have a listen to the difference now that I've basically virtually modded one of the drive types. That is bringing the beef. That makes such a difference on there, listening through my monitors in here anyway. It's something, again, where it's not going to be the same type of massive difference you get going from a fuzz to a light overdrive, but being able to take a core overdrive sound that you really like, that maybe you think, oh, this is close to what I want, and you just want to give it that something extra, play around with the different diode types and the diode configuration in there. One thing that I really like this for, though, is taking this into an already cranked up amp. So I'll give you an example of that. I'm just going to swap guitars to one of my drop C guitars. Okay, here's my main live preset. I'm using the FAS Stealth Blue amp model in here. I would normally have the CC boost on in here, but I've turned it off, and we're going to use a drive block for a boost over here. What I've got is, again, the good old Maxoff 808, drive all the way down, tone and level cranked up on there. I have the stock diode setup in here. What I'm going to do is on channel B, I'm going to go over to those SD1 diodes and the diode setup. And in the tone page, I'm going to change the mid frequency to 1600 Hertz. So it's 600 Hertz on the stock 808, but I've found that cranking this up above, say, 1500 Hertz, somewhere in that 1500 to 2 kilohertz zone, really works well if you want to take an already cooking high gain amp and massively tighten it up. Let's have a listen. That sounds pretty bunto, right? What I like about this is you can choose a drive type and use the basic controls to get really close to what you want. And only if you feel like it needs that extra little bit of sauce, you can go in and use the advanced settings like the tone page, the graphic EQ, or these diode swapping options in here. We didn't really talk about the bias settings or the lo-fi settings in there. You know, if you wanted to create like a bit crusher effect, you can use the bit reduction in there and play with the sample rate as well. The bias is really effective with different fuzz types in there. But again, without getting too lost in the source, use this stuff sparingly. Maybe use one or two of these tricks where, say, you could come in here and go, well, I like swapping out these diodes in a particular drive, save it to your blocks library and you're good to go. Or take an existing drive type and rather than use the tone, use the EQ section in there. Having said all of that, you know, there's a whole industry based around taking very widely used simple circuits and essentially baking in little mods like this. Like, oh, it's a tube screamer with slightly different diode and EQ setups in there. Whereas in here with the Fractal, if we want to play around with those things, we've got all those options laid out for us. It really is an amazing, amazing unit in that regard. And I love it so much. So again, if you feel like you're getting really close to what you want and you just want to give it a bit of extra spice, try these options. I'd love to hear what drives, what guitars, what amp setups work out for you. I feel like it'd be a really good little community project for everybody to throw out their favorite settings when it comes to, say, the different diode configurations in there. And again, I'm somebody who doesn't know anything about the specifics of the engineering involved in these. I can just sometimes remember, oh, the 808 has an MA150. I don't know what an MA150 does or anything like that, but I know if I pop it into an SD1, I get something slightly different. Approach all of this with a very playful mindset. I think you can get some great results. For now, though, I think I might play you all out with this giant chungus of a guitar sound. I will see you all on next week's Tuesday Tone Tip. Take it easy.